This is another Debate Talk for You radio public announcement. The views and opinions expressed by individuals on this platform, the callers plus invited guests, are their own. The information you hear does not reflect the overall views of all parties associated with this brand. We encourage everyone to research all things heard live or via archive for edification purposes. Discretion is advised.
Don't touch that dial. You're now listening to Debate Talk for You Radio.
Shalom, shalom, everyone. This is Sheek Attiba, and I'm a member of the Israelite community. I came on to talk tonight about inequities in education and its Black benefit, okay? The purpose of this discussion is to empower so-called African-American parents to shape the education system to a system that better serves the needs of their children. We will also discuss other options such as charter homeschooling and co-op that have been in the limelight as alternatives for minorities who struggle to find quality education that instills pride and knowledge of oneself. Tonight I have two guests. One guest has not come in yet, but I have one guest by the name of L.D Straus, and he will be lending his voice to education with his knowledge and his view as a Black male working within the system. So I'll go ahead and allow him to introduce himself and his purpose. So L.D Straus, if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, how you doing? I'm L.D Straus. I'm a teacher here in Dallas. So just kind of chiming in and just want to just lend out a helping hand as to what I think is what I see on a daily basis as far as in our inner city schools as opposed to suburb schools and things of that nature. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to go straight down our agenda, and then we'll be taking questions and comment and input. I've invited people in the Hebrew community. I've invited people from the education community who have all expressed concerns and ideas of what we can do better to enhance the system. Because in reality, there is money being left on the table. We're paying into a system that's not equitably giving us what others are getting, as far as curriculum, as far as discipline, and many other areas. And those are the things we're going to talk about today. So the first question is, does Black benefit from education? And so I'll let my guest answer first, and then I'll go ahead and give my answer.
You talking about me? Does Black benefit from education?
Yeah. Do you think?
I think that generally everybody benefits from education. I think education is one of those things where what you put into it is what you get out of it. I think that in the school system there are different forms of education, and unfortunately some of the things that we try to teach our kids, they just aren't able to connect to. But as far as does Blacks benefit from education, absolutely yes.
Okay. And, some people might feel like we're biased because we're educated, right? But I will say that Blacks do benefit from education. Are we benefiting from the education that we ultimately receive? I think to a certain extent we do, and then it stops. We don't learn the things that specifically we need for survival, for self-worth, and things of that nature. We learn specifically to a Eurocentric background, which it's important to learn about other people, but when do you learn about yourself. And so I think that education is helpful to a certain extent, but stops or becomes stagnant, especially when we look at high school. I feel like high school is where the drop-off comes, mainly because we have parents who feel like they have teenagers who feel like they know what to do or what the expectation is. And then we have children or students who have heard the same thing over and over. As we look at curriculum, it really doesn't change that much. You know, now they're starting to push things down, and that's good and that's favorable. But, yeah, it does help us to know how to be educated. It does help us to be educated about others, and it does help us to learn discipline as far as showing up and how to act, I guess I would say appropriately, but act in a mainstream way to survive in an environment. So I would say that. But, yeah, ultimately it is beneficial, but we have to know how to use it in correct ways is my answer. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Blacks in Education inspiration. I heard from someone in the conscious community say that Black women just left education. They just left. They didn't care about kids anymore, and they left education. And that deeply hurt me because there's so many Black women still in education. Matter of fact, we are the predominant ones in education if we want to go to gender. And so that really hurt me. But we have to understand that the reason why Blacks are moved in and out of education has to do with our condition, and it also has to do with policy. And a lot of people do not understand that. So we had some court cases happen, which is Plessy versus Ferguson, which deemed that racially segregated public facilities were legal so long as the facilities for Blacks and whites were equal. Well, we know that that was not happening. It was not equal. They did not have equal resources, and the question of whether they did was not brought up in that specific case. So then we have another case called Brown v. Board of Education that happened in Topeka, Kansas. And it was a landmark case of 1954, the Supreme Court case in which the justices ruled unanimously that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. And it was one of the cornerstones of the civil rights movement and helped to establish the precedent that separate but equal education and other services were not, in fact, equal at all. So, basically, the impact on integration had the impact it did on every other area, such as, like, instead of going to the Black grocer, people went to the white grocer. Well, why did they do that? It wasn't because they felt, well, I can't say everybody, that going to the white grocer was better. The white grocer was cheaper. They were able to negotiate more. They had more customers, so they could say, hey, I'm selling you here. The same thing that Walmart does today, and I actually majored in business. And so in business, the reason why Walmart is able to get away with so much is because they have so much power. So they actually are called or were called the bully of retail because they would tell distributors, you can't come into my store, unless you undersell the price by this much. Okay? And so it was the same thing where Black grocers could not get the same prices as white grocers, yet the people who were patronizing them only had a certain amount of resources, so the white grocer was cheaper. Mm-hmm. So they had to get more bang for their dollar. And so what integration did for education is the same thing that integration did across businesses and economics for all Black people. When integration occurred in education, 30 to 50,000 teachers of course, America, black teachers and principals, just black faculty, staff, everything, lost their job. And it was actually, before that was the main way people were actually making their living and income, because black people did believe that education was the way. And that was not because somebody told them. It's because they knew what their children needed to know. So, L.D. Straus, did you know any of that, or had you looked into the history, or how do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, I knew about the cases, but you did kind of educate me a little bit as far as just going into detail. Of course, everyone knew about the cases of Plessy v. Ferguson and Brown v. Board of Education. But I do feel like there's definitely an inequity in the black schools, per se, and the suburban schools as far as funding and as the quality of education. It's not the quality of kids, it's the quality of resources, the quality of access to those resources that our kids have. That sometimes causes inequity. And simple things, the buildings, whether you realize it or not, a building makes a big difference. And it makes a big difference in our personal life. You know, you get a nice car, and of course you're adept to take care of it. You get a nice school building, and you feel as if there's a sense of pride inside that building. And unfortunately, some of the buildings we have are old, and they've been there for such a long time. And our kids, that mindset our kids get when they get there is, it's not nothing new and nothing fresh. And so to change our kids' mindset, a small thing such as a building can help replenish that mindset. Working computers all the time can help replenish that mindset. Not having to come to school that's consistent construction going on could change the mindset. I'm quite sure in not going to name any areas, but in other suburban areas, when school starts, their building is operable. It's ready. There's no hiccups. Several schools I can speak of in the inner city, in the city I live in, well, they've been having construction done all year. And that itself shows that, hey, yeah, we're trying to make it nicer, but we're doing it at your inconvenience. And so sometimes the kids feel already inconvenienced just by coming to the school. It's like, oh, you don't really care, because had you really cared, you'd make sure that you got this done. So, but I definitely think there's an inequality in the resources, in the buildings, and the funding, even some things as small as the cafeteria. You know, that's definitely inequality there. You got so many kids in the inner city schools who don't. I'm a coach who don't eat lunch, and well, the food's not good, and the food's not good here. Well, what happens? Sometimes those kids skip school for lunch and the food's not good, and they'll leave them off campus, and the truth of the matter, they just don't come back. And unfortunately, that happens. Unfortunately, I think all that plays a part into the education, and that plays a part into funding, and that plays a part into, I guess, the health of the overall student. So.
But it also plays a part in the staff and the faculty that you're able to obtain at the time. When I looked at the stats of why black teachers leave education, it's because they're in poorly underfunded schools. So they're being compared. Now, keep in mind, I'm gonna put it out there in the district of Dallas, we can see that there are inequities. As far as how money is being spent, and it has been called out, and they have done things to rectify it. But at the same time, it's just like, we had SOC walk out, South Oak Cliff High School walk out because of the conditions of their buildings. While we have funded schools and new schools that are being opened that are fully staffed, their buildings are in operable condition. So now it's turning into sorry, y'all. Hello. I apologize. My phone fell. Can I be heard?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, you loud and clear. You're good.
Okay, thank you, Sal. So now it's being turned into I'm sorry. The other person is about to call in. Her phone died. Okay. So they is inoperable, and so then we have to wonder how is the spending being what is that called? How is it being determined where you stand and where you don't, and who is monitoring that? And so, we have issues with funding. We still have where schools are being funded by property tax, when we know that housing discrimination is still actively happening. Okay, we know that. There was a commercial on the radio just 2 years ago that said that had the black guy call in and it was like, no, it's not for rent, or no, it's not for sale, and then had the white guy call in and said, oh yeah, we'll be happy to show you around this property. So it's still happening. It's by no coincidence that gentrification happens. How does all these people who go into white flight all come back at the same time? And I can say it doesn't happen at the same time because I lived in an area of Oak Cliff where when I first moved there, it was nothing but black people. Then I started seeing white people walk down the street, and I'm like, who is that? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's about to be gentrified. But I thought maybe I was tripping in my mind. And it's certainly enough, more and more, because the word spreads and people move. But it's not by coincidence. Realtors have to be a part of that. Plans have to be made, and there were certain plans by the city made for that particular area. So I don't think that this is a coincidence. And I say this because my own high school got shut down by investment realtors who came into the high school, who infiltrated the high school through people certified as educators to shut down the school, to reopen it, like reinstitutionalize it, which is like reopen it and call it a magnet or this or that to bring greater talent to it so that the investment people would not lose their money. And that was Mont Bello High School in Denver, Colorado. There's a whole article written about it by a former classmate of mine, and I can't remember the name, but I will post a link in the description of this box. And so we have to understand that our schools have a lot to do with realty, how much it sells for, gentrification, and a lot of people don't understand why gentrification is bad. They take old homes, they make them new, but then you raise the property value on your grandma who's not working anymore and has a fixed income. So she's forced to move out of it. And so when you raise property taxes, you change somebody's mortgage. Okay. I just
so can I add something on to that?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, this is Miss Sonia. She's joining us. I'm glad you were able to make it, dear. Love you.
Me too. Thank you. Technology is a gift and a curse sometimes.
Okay.
What I'd like to add on to what you are describing is simply this. When you look at a situation like what's happening in DeSoto ISD, that writing has been on the wall for quite some time. What you need in order to have a thriving school system or a thriving school in a particular area is rooftops, not apartments, because property tax, which you already touched on. And in situations where there are many, many, many rooftops, the expectation is to have many, many, many kids. Well, in a situation like DeSoto, who opened up their school district to take people from anywhere, limits now the number of rooftops that can be counted in other situations. But they did not have the infrastructure in place to be able to take care of those students that they were acquiring from other places and all over the city, in my opinion, mainly due to athletics. This is a 6A institution who participates in athletics on a high level year after year after year. They're able to do that by acquiring athletes throughout the city, from everywhere in the city.
Absolutely.
And that is not counting rooftops necessarily in DeSoto. rooftops in DeSoto is what equals how much money DeSoto gets. But those kids are coming from homes in other places. So you can't count those rooftops because they aren't actually in DeSoto ISD. And in order for them to be able to maintain their 6A status, they have to have a certain number of students. You look at a situation like what happened with Wilmer Hutchins. Before it became a part of Dallas Independent School District, it was shut down for 10, 12 years. What happened there was mismanagement of funds, because obviously it's stupid easy to steal from the school district. But the fact that there was not affordable housing being built and in place. But when I was growing up in that area, there was one stoplight, and it was a flashing red. If you go out there now, there are subdivisions.
Right. That's where I live. Yeah, exactly.
There are rooftops. So because there are these subdivisions that have been put in the last 10 years, last 15 years, they needed a school. They're collecting property taxes, but there was no school in the area for the kids to attend. So they had no choice but to either Wilmer Hutchins was going to have to reopen or be absorbed by Dallas Independent School District and reopen that way, which is what they did. So what you're explaining is right based on data and observation. You can see it happening with your own two eyes. If there's no affordable housing, you're not going to have a thriving school. You're not going to have community-based school programs because the people are below the poverty line. And there are so many people who live below the poverty line in general. There's an article out about why under this presidential administration unemployment has remained as it is. That's due in part to the fact that most people have two jobs.
Absolutely.
Just to be able to cover the rent.
Right.
So there is a disparity in the equity of how funding is distributed, especially based on property tax, especially based on the fact that there is not affordable housing in many of these areas, and especially the fact that when you have situations like DeSoto that are open school districts now, Grand Prairie ISD is open school districts now, that allow students to come from anywhere, to come from everywhere, you really do a disservice to those local community schools because those kids aren't sitting there. Why
do they do a disservice to those local community schools and they move these kids around? The reason why is because the money is going with the kid.
Absolutely.
Schools get funded by enrollment. So when your children are not going to their community school, then it's going to be underfunded, which is the reason why you send them to other places anyway, because your school is being funded by the property tax. So if you're in a low area funded school and then you see this bright old school over yonder, you want to send your child there, but you're also taking the money from the school and sending it there too. It is up to parents who are the consumers to say, I want something great or something to come to the school. Now, at my school, it took investment people who wanted to build out there because it's by the airport in Denver, you know. So they're like, we in Denver past weed, so property prices skyrocketed. People who have lived there for years can't even afford to live there. As soon as weed passed in Denver, you're seeing 125,000 homes go to 300. That quick. That's why I'm like, everybody wants to pass weed. Well, you better be in the home before it does, okay? And so these investment people wanted to pass it, but they could see it happen in Colorado, like, way before I could see it back in the 90s.
Oak Cliff. You can look around Oak Cliff. Oak Cliff is an established middle-class community that's been around for more than 100 years. And what you have now is investment companies coming in, buying these properties from people who have lived in the community forever. They're ready to downsize. They're ready to retire. They can no longer maintain some of these properties that are, in effect, huge. As a matter of fact, there's multiple golf courses in Oak Cliff, for example. People living on the golf courses, they're older now. They can't maintain the property on their level anymore, and they're to sell. It's a seller's market where real estate is concerned.
But why can't they maintain the properties? Why can't they maintain the properties? Because you have racist hiring practices. You have racist hiring practices. You have racist hiring practices when it comes to upper management. These people are middle class, but they can't move up for some reason.
But they can't.
You know,
let me talk about that where education is concerned too. I wanna finish the point about the investors. If you look around, the investors, it's easy to identify. The doors are blue. The aesthetic of the homes is being changed to these brown colored cedar wood planks that are, being added to the window shutters, the fences, these different aesthetics that are being added to the landscaping of these properties. They all look the same. And if you look at the signs, one investment company. It's the same way you see a Family Dollar on nearly every corner or two within Dallas County. Somebody has sold Dallas County to Family Dollar. Somebody's getting some kickback off of that, and I'm just speaking my opinion.
And a lot of these investors are foreign.
Foreign, don't live here, don't live in the community. You're absolutely right. Now, and I just wanted to make that point. You can just look around and see that there's one or two investment companies that are coming in, buying up all these properties, changing the aesthetics of the neighborhood. The houses don't even fit in with the general look and feel of the neighborhood, but they're being renovated. They're brand new. That's what people do, right? They buy the homes, they renovate them, they flip them over, resell them, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the thing. The reason people aren't able to maintain those properties, as we get older, we need a little less, or at least that's, the thought. And we may not be working full-time anymore. Maybe we're past retirement and we are drawing Social Security. Maybe we did not work for Caterpillar for, 23 years when they were still giving out pensions. And we don't have the means like we used to maintain these 4,100 square foot homes in Redbird Oaks, for example. However, the other
but you may have paid for it.
It
might be paid off.
And it might be paid off. The other piece to what you're describing, though, is something that I saw on social media recently. It is really difficult for a lot of people to break the glass ceilings in their careers. The question was asked, why are there so many teachers with master's degrees and doctorate degrees who are trapped in the classroom?
Right. Oh, well, let me give this stat. 80% of high school principals are white.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah. It is.
That's a big
deal.
The
average teacher is a middle-class white woman. And so you might say, well, then at least 20% for black people who are only 14% of the population. But most of our schools are not.
Is that statistic? Is that nationwide, or is that based on a certain? I guess
that's nationwide.
Area or...
That's nationwide.
Okay.
Yeah, that's nationwide, and so we'll see highly populated black schools or highly populated Latino schools with a black or Hispanic, principal. But when you see a mixed variety, you're normally going to see a white principal. Now, I don't know the demographics for Texas, but we're talking nationally. And so, audience, you will hear a lot of Texas being discussed here because we are all Texas educators. But Texas is the third largest school, what is that? Not school district, but school market in the United States. I think it's New York, California, then Texas. And so, it's so powerful that it influences the textbook that your children receive. Because when Common Core came around, I learned this when I was in my master's. When Common Core came around, Texas was like, we're not changing anything. We're going to have the teach. Now, keep in mind, the teachers in Common Core are really not that different. They test different. And they actually test to me, I reviewed both, to like a higher knowledge based off of, like what you need to know. Like you can take the STAR and use a calculator, but there were certain things in the Common Core test from New York that I had actually observed and wrote about both in my papers, that you had to know it. You had to, like, know what you were doing, and that's what they were testing for. And so, I'm sorry, I got all into that because my university was like, ooh, Common Core is this. But anyway, Texas said that they were not going to change, and national textbook writers went along with the Texas teach in order to get the business. So this is all about money, to get the business of selling textbooks and having access to Texas. So we have to know that. If we don't know those things, then what are we to do? And where do you hear those things? And, you know, you hear those things in upper, you know, either your upper career-wise or your upper and where you pursue your education. Because I know the institution I went to, they were also involved in writing curriculum for the state as well. So, yeah. It's all a money game. So, L.D Straus, tell me how you feel about the business of education outside of education. Do you think it belongs there or not?
What? Is that the question? Do I think it's a what?
Do you think that the business of education, as far as realty and things like that, belongs there, or no?
It's a tough question. I know education is supposed to be a non-profit business, but I don't think that. I don't think business really should necessarily just play a part in it. I think that if we really are truly going to get down to education, we should value everybody's education, no matter what socioeconomic background they come from, the same. We should treat all the kids equal. You know, you mentioned something about SOC earlier, about those students walking out because of their building conditions. Well, I'm pretty sure, I can't say this factually, but in talking to different people, I'm pretty sure that one of the things SOC requested before they came back into their school, before they go back into their school, was to have the water pipes changed. And I'm also pretty sure there's other schools within DISD that has bad water. And I'm not making it like a Flint, Michigan thing, but bad water, letting your water leads to ADHD. Bad water in the community leads to those different things. And you look at why sometimes in the black community, why are so many kids special education? Why are so many kids labeled as ADHD? Possibly the water they've been drinking from a very young age plays a part of their mental psyche. So those are also conditions. But original question as far as business.
Let me ask you this, though. But then why wasn't it happening when other people occupied those things? Because we see normally that usually our white counterparts live there, and then black people move in, and then we move out, then Hispanic people move in. Is it because it seems like when black people move in the neighborhood, the property value goes down? What basis is that at all, despite the racism that we experience from this country that would actually, you know, put us in a position where we could not maintain property. You know, we could not get our lawns cut, or we cannot, you know, or we have to house other family members and stuff. So, I mean,
sometimes we just don't know what to do. There's articles written from just over the years, Ms. Johnson, about creating the wards and creating projects, and how people had to be taught how to care for carpet because people were found mopping their carpet. And then you have it's a we don't know how, and I'll find the articles for you. The other thing is what we make priority. What we make priority. I just told you that these people couldn't make payroll in DeSoto ISE. They couldn't make payroll 3 years ago, but they have been so focused on winning a championship and beating up boys up in Allen, Texas. It's what we make priority. A lot of times, in looking at a situation like South Oak Cliff, you look at South Oak Cliff and you look at what's around South Oak Cliff, and you tell me where those people, where those people's priorities are. And it is extremely possible to have an administrator in place who is ambitious and more concerned about their career than they are about the health, welfare, and well-being of their students.
Well, I can say that I've been around the South Coast
to have.
I can't say that I've been around the South Oak Cliff area, and I haven't seen new cars. I haven't seen, houses been done up or kids walking around specifically spectacular, in that neighborhood. And so I would wonder if the priority is surviving.
It's a food desert. But there are, when Dallas was no longer dry, became no longer dry, there were liquor stores, or not the liquor store, but the beer and wine you can get everywhere now.
Right. Oh,
you understand what I'm getting?
When it was dry.
It's like what a lot of times it's what we prioritize.
There
are those administrators who don't put in those
prioritization, because I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you what that is.
Here's my point.
It's people not knowing.
Specifically talking about though. Part of it is about knowing. The other part is specifically talking about situations like South Oak Cliff. And listen, this is my experience, okay? Because I started out as a substitute teacher with Dallas Independent School District at places like Pinkston and South Oak Cliff all the way back in 2002. You have administrators that aren't concerned with that. They're not putting in the request to have the floors waxed and the water fountains replaced and the proper maintenance done. And I had an administrator one year that I asked for trash cans to be placed outside the front doors for when we had families coming in for orientation for our students, so that they wouldn't throw the dirty diapers in the parking lot. Do you think those trash cans ever showed up?
No.
Yeah.
But we got into our parking lot, our home, and driving over dirty diapers because these parents have to enroll their kids into our program, and they bring their little ones with them to the orientation. They change their diapers in the car and leave the diapers in the parking lot. There are people who just aren't concerned with that. They can't be bothered with that. They have bigger fish to fry. And I just want you to consider this. The Mike Miles years in Dallas ISD, they probably could not have made a request for anything and had it honored because he was a person that felt like the teachers were worthless anyway and the administrators were worthless as well. So it's that too, the politics. That's a better way to describe it. Dealing with the politics of school districts and human conditions. Sometimes
that I absolutely agree with as far as priorities. Like some people feel like they ought to be happy they have a school because of the things that they have to deal with. And I was just talking to my sister dealing with that, but it doesn't matter. They deal with those things because of other things, and we have to understand where the trail goes back. I feel like what happens a lot of times to Black parents is that they just look at the results and they're just like, well, you should care more. Do I care more about my kid surviving in the school, or do I care more about my family surviving in this world? We've had kids homeless, we've had kids, in all types of situations, and then it's just like, I'm just happy I can open the doors. But you have to be doing more, because what your school should be and what my school was when I was growing up, and even when I was in New York, what the local high school was a beacon of the community. And I feel like we have too many administrators not willing to make their school a beacon of community, meaning that we are open for a long time. We have people covering you. We have parents being trained. We have motivational speakers coming in. We have things going on here that is actually going to help you, actually going to help your child. But your child does need to learn this curriculum because it will set the course of their future. If they're not good at math, then they can't veer off into that engineering or whatever math required, specialty.
Their priority is, elsewhere and otherwise versus making their schools and their students the actual priorities in the situation.
Right. So but we need people in there who care. And I can say that been looking for an administrative job. It's very political. It's very who you know. It's very what you can get the drop on before other people do. It's not very much concerned about who's going to work for this school. Who cares about this community?
And getting the right people in the right positions to help less.
Mm-hmm.
To getting people the right people in the right positions to help our kids thrive.
Absolutely. And but I can't say that that's just white educators. And I do want to talk about this. We have some black educators who have negative views about black children and black parents.
Oh, yeah.
And they have said it to my face. And I was like, do you know who I am? Don't say that to my face. I don't like it. But I'm going to move on now, too, because it was integration that initially moved, black educators out of education. A lot of them, took over their jobs and actually destroyed a lot of the black educator committees. Not committees, but organizations, okay? So then we go ahead from that, and the next thing that starts to affect it, I'm just going to say this briefly and then move on because we need to get to something extra special. It was the pay. You don't want to pay teachers. So now you have specifically African-American women who were in education more so than men become head of households. And now they can't support their family on a teacher salary. So these college-educated women have to go somewhere else. That's just, in the data. I will go ahead and post that in the links as well. But then we had GW come with No Child Left Behind. And what No Child Left Behind did is that it actually said you have to have this amount of hours in your upper levels. That means your junior and senior level of college in order to teach something. Okay? Now, when I went to high school, that was not in place. So when I went back to my high school after No Child Left Behind, all those people were gone. They were gone because they had not had a certain amount of hours, and now they can only teach certain things. So when you look at diversity of a school parent, you need to look at where the black teachers are. Are they all coaches? Are they all special education and in English? Or is there a equitable amount represented in science, represented in social studies, represented all throughout down to the cafeteria? You hear me? And that is how we need to view equity. Oh, hold on. Okay, L.D. Straus dropped, but he'll come back in when he gets a chance. Anyway, so No Child Left Behind then put extra limited restraints on where we could teach, and traditionally black people tend to go into majors where other black people are. It's just it. I love to go to HBCU, and I went to HBCU, and Miss Sonia went to a HBCU, and then you see black people everywhere, and then it becomes a different scenario. But most of the time when you're at a majority college, you tend to go either where your talent lies, where it's kind of easy for you, or people. And that's just anybody. That doesn't have anything to do with color. It's just what happens. And so that's how No Child Left Behind had an impact. It was good for things like special education, although some people will argue that it wasn't good because special education became mainstream. You weren't if you have a learning disability, you weren't put at the basement of the school anymore. And now people have to deal with you. But it did definitely change the dynamic of the classroom, having teachers who have to deal with all abilities, except for, I don't buy that excuse. I'm sorry, high school teachers. I don't buy that excuse that you have to deal with all these disabilities or abilities, because when you was at an elementary school, okay, and somebody in kindergarten, first, and even second grade, they're dealing with all types of different levels as well. And they find a way to accommodate accommodate them. And so that's why when we go to Sir Kensington Williams, oh my God, what's his name? Sir Kenyon. I'm going to put that link in the comment as well. Sir Kensington, he's like, why are we
A little more milk.
why are we packaging kids to the same age level, the same ability, the same thing? People of all abilities should be able to learn in one classroom. It's called differentiation, okay? And our high school teachers have been very resistant to it, but leadership has not led the way in that fight either. Has not changed the way classrooms are set up, has not changed the way, children learn and kind of like forge. This is our expectation. If you say this is the expectation, then people will have to meet it to some degree, and it'll be easier as you go along. But that hasn't been pushed yet, and I think it's really to protect the job market from people coming out early. But, how do you feel about that, Ms. Diane?
Well, I think you're right. I think a lot of what is happening in that particular situation is a lot of people who are administrators are not really prepared to be instructional. They don't really know what to do. So it's really hard for them to be supportive from an instructional standpoint when it comes to situations like special education. And you're right about No Child Left Behind. With the introduction of inclusion and the limiting of the self-contained classroom situation, in 2019, a third-year teacher, second-year teacher, first-year teacher, a fifth-year teacher may not be able to adequately explain to you the difference between an accommodation and a modification for a student with an IEP.
Can you explain what accommodation versus a modification is? Can you explain that? So we're moving into special education right now, which is a heavy topic. But tell the audience what the difference between an accommodation and a modification.
The difference between an accommodation and a modification, to just make it very simple, is that accommodation can be done literally for any student in order for them to better perform in the classroom. Things such as giving them more time to complete an assignment, or the color of the paper that they use. That's an accommodation. A modification actually reduces the number of teachers in the curriculum that they are expected to be able to master.
Okay, let me explain this for those who are not in Texas, because there's a lot of people not in Texas. That means that if you have a core standard, or if you had a standard of learning set by your state, now a lot of people don't know this, but the state actually decides the curriculum, and it is policy, it is law. This is why voters have an opportunity to change what is taught. But if you don't know that, then you don't know how to ballot for that. Okay, so a standard can have like maybe three things that the child has to do. They have to be able to subtract 3-digit numbers using the carrying system. Well, what a special education student with a cognitive disability or a severe learning disability may have to do is that they may have to subtract single-digit numbers at a time. Okay? So this, it reduces the no. Let me go back. A 3-digit number by carrying system, my thing would say that they would have to do a 3-digit number, 1 digit at a time. That's a modification. Yeah. Because now they're showing that they can. Right. Because if I say 1 digit, it makes it seem like I'm changing it. No, I'm saying that they still have to do 3, but they're going to do it 1 digit at a time. Right. Yeah. And then we'll work on carrying. And then we'll work on,
Right. And their test, rather than having 4 answers for multiple choice tests, would only have 3 choices in a multiple choice test. That's a modified workload type of situation.
And we would remove the obvious distractor because our kids in special education tend to get distracted, right? So we're going to remove the distractor from that and then give the possible answers that will tell us what mistakes they're making in making that choice.
It shows us better what their thinking errors might be in those situations. So, but the fact that you have teachers in the classroom that have zero idea what they should be doing for these students, third year, fourth year, fifth year, and then they say, well, we haven't had a lot of training on this. The same thing about classroom management, First year teachers, they're not teaching classroom management in these teacher programs, and then they get in there and they struggle to set limits and boundaries and clear expectations with their students. And then when their students underperform, what we have to do is then say, okay, teacher, you're now on a growth plan or this thing or that thing. From an administrative standpoint, it is because many of our administrators spent the minimum required amount of time in the classroom and ran for the hills. It was never their goal, and in many of them, their heart, to really be in the classroom. And because they've spent only minimal amounts of time in the classroom, they're ill-equipped to be able to support their teachers from an instructional standpoint. You can't ask a question from an instructional or curriculum standpoint, a pedagogy standpoint. To many of these administrators, they can't answer it. They've been out of the classroom longer than they were ever in the classroom, and they're not able to help. So you have this real disparage between administration and the teachers, and because they're not supporting their staff, they're losing staff. You have high turnover, and then at the end of the day, of course, the kids are suffering. They're not getting what it is that they need in order to be able to succeed. This to the other point that you made about, kind of calling BS with high school teachers in the different levels, because on the elementary level, that is exactly what you do. You have to teach all of the different varying levels of development. You're going to have the third grader, for example, who is 7 years old.
Oh, you could be going in and out. You're going in and out.
You're breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Am I back now? Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to have the 7-year-old entering third grade. They haven't quite turned 8 yet. They won't be 8 till the end of the month. And school has already started. But then you're going to have the kids that are already 8, and they're 8 and 6 months. And before school gets out, they'll already be 9. So you have these varying levels of development that you're dealing with on the elementary level, day in and day out. And because because a teacher has to do that on the elementary level, I know it can be done on the high school level too. Research tells us that we teach to the middle of the classroom. It is unfortunate, but it is true. You teach to the middle of the classroom, and then you have your lower tiered students, and then your higher tiered students. It is a reality.
You prepare and you plan for them. You prepare and you plan for them, though.
Thank you. It is a reality, but there is a way to deal with it successfully as well. You prepare and you plan for them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the kids who need modifications. Let's do white test papers, yellow test papers, and blue test papers. Nobody knows the difference but you. But the effort it takes sometimes for teachers to be able to get that done when they have to put in for their copies a week in advance, or the copy machine is broken, they don't have any paper, simple things that could help our kids to really thrive. The effort that it takes for the teacher, a lot of times the teachers don't see it as worth it. And then you look to your administrator for that assistance. You say, hey, I want to be able to do this, and I want to be able to do that, and I want to implement. That's a good word. I want to implement these things into the classroom. I need a resource. I need some help being able to implement these things into the classroom. And you get met with a no. We don't have the person for that, or we don't have the money for that. We don't have the time for that. What do we have time for? That then becomes the question. What do we have?
Right. And I think having resources is very important, especially when you want people to educate students with special needs in a general ed classroom. And I think that is one of the reasons why teachers feel ill-equipped. So I'm not saying that that's not the case. But, Sal, just want to check in with you and see if there's any callers on the line before we go into special education, because we're about to get deep. This is our area. We're about to go deep.
All right, family. So we have a lot of people on the phone lines listening to the show. If you have any questions or comments, you know that number, 319-527-6239. Simply press number 1, and we'll add you into the conversation. I'll let you know when somebody press number 1. But you can continue.
Okay. So special education. No Child Left Behind actually what it did is, when we were in school for special education, anybody deemed or identified with special education was in some class, probably in the basement, probably separate from general population. Well, parents said, no, that's not going to happen anymore, and you're going to give our kids a quality education. Okay? So now every child is entitled to a free and appropriate education. Now, I'm talking about NICOB, although we're on something else right now, which is Everyone Achieves Act. And we're going to talk about that. And that kind of like limited, standardized tested and promotion. But No Child Left Behind still left behind the idea that everybody has to be tested. And so I actually gave the STAR alt this year, and it was I feel like this is not dignifying and so inappropriate. You know, like, it was inappropriate for the level of student I was testing, and it's just like we have to come up with better ways than wasting people's time doing that, you know. But as far as students who have a learning disability that can achieve in the classroom, they can. My second year teaching, I had a IV intellectually disabled child pass the state exam, which was called PACS at the time. So I know if he can pass, you know, several other students can pass, but he was given an equitable opportunity to pass. This is why my teaching motto, when they ask me on this application, what is your teaching motto? My teaching motto is that all children can learn if given an equitable opportunity. Okay? That just does not happen. It just doesn't. And so when we talk about blacks in education, we're going to get to that in culturally relevant pedagogy, but when we talk about blacks in education, it certainly is not happening. Just you can look at the curriculum and see it's not happening. So, but as far as special education, we have children who have real serious issues, but if they're giving the attention that they need, the time that they need, they can perform. Unfortunately, you're talking about a teacher with 30 to 24 person classroom.
Right. And that's where those resources come in, those people resources, those time resources, those money resources to really assist kids with giving them, and I like the way you stated that equitable opportunity. You have to level the playing field for them. And you also have to look at how and you also have to look at how districts are using their special education resources, including people. You know, do they have one special educator who is responsible for art, everything in the art, in class time, in case management? You know, when somebody's responsible for all those things, then one is going to suffer at a time, whereas other
districts, they have maybe one person who does the resource class, a case manager, and then somebody who's out there in inclusion. They just work out the schedule. So you want to make sure that your child is being equitably placed. Now, I don't have the LSSP here tonight. She had some car trouble, so she was not able to call in. But I will say that I'm going to talk about over-identification for special education minority students. And Dr. Umar Johnson, he talks about this a lot, about how you lock up fathers for some of the same drugs you give their kids because you say that they have ADHD. And we talked about the condition of pipes, the condition of schools, the condition of homes that actually lend to these things. Of course, some of us do not agree with vaccination and how vaccination also plays a part, and doctors have come up and spoken about that. So we have environmental factors that are playing into the abilities of our children to perform, and that comes with poverty. But I would say it's just poverty, but it doesn't happen across. It does happen across racial lines, but it's significant differences, in certain areas. And so what I would say is before you put a label on your child, try to make sure that they're getting all the intervention that they can from the school first. Okay? Because a lot of times children are bored, so they're not being challenged enough, or they're not helped enough. They're the people who don't always get it because maybe they might be a slow learner. Okay? So there's a process. Nobody should be referring your child to special education just because. They should be talking to you first and telling you that they think that your child has an issue and presenting work in front of them, in front of you, to show you this is what he's performing at. I'm a little bit concerned, okay? Then they should be talking to you about what interventions they have already tried or they're going to try next. Then they have to go to a school support team, okay? And you have to make sure that somebody from special education is on the school support team, okay? And then that person will talk with the teacher, and they will agree to interventions for a period of 6 weeks. Then you monitor how the child is doing. If the child is not progressing, then there's a recommendation for testing. Testing then has to be formed within 90 days of the request, okay? Once the testing is
so
done.
Glad you're explaining that process.
Yeah. Once the testing is done, then they will come back and tell you if there's a significant difference. Now, like teaching, diagnosticians are mainly dominated by a white female, okay? It's just the same thing going up. Whoever dominates the teaching is going to dominate every other area as well. So if you don't feel comfortable with, and you don't have to receive special education services, but if you don't feel comfortable with your child, if they don't make progress, and you have to make sure that that progress is documented and that they really are receiving it. Because some people will say that they are giving them this intervention and they really aren't. And they may even document that they are, but they really aren't. Check in with your kids. Did you go here, today? Did you go there today? That's important, okay? Because you need to know. Check in. Just drop in. When it's supposed to be going on, drop in and make sure it is, because people will just feel a certain way about your child. And I'm not saying every educator, because there's some good educators out there. They will feel some way about your child, and he's just never going to get it. He never gets my instructions, so something must be wrong with him or her, but specifically him, because it happens a lot to our boys. And say they're doing stuff, document it, but is it really happening as it should? Nobody is monitoring that. Who is monitoring that? That's the question you need to be asking, okay? So if you don't feel comfortable with the school testing your child, you have a right to independent evaluation outside of the school. Now, I don't believe that we pay for that. I think that you have to pay for that. That's the downfall of that. but you pay for that, and they will evaluate your child. They have no interest in the school or anything, and they will tell you what areas your child struggles in or what they need to learn. Now, the fault happens that if your child gets into special education, now you can sign a form and they can get out. That's fine. But once they are in there, what diagnosticians normally do is ask the R committee, that's the admission review dismissal team, that's the meeting you go to every year. You will have a meeting every year if your child is admitted to special education, okay? You will have a meeting every year to go over goals and how the student is progressing, and their transition information, which is very important because your child is supposed to transition in some type of way, and that means either they're going to college, they're going to a day hab, which is a facility that keeps children who, or not children, they'll be adults by then because you can age out, but children, or I'm going to say adults with special needs, if they are unable to work, okay? And I said college they have, or they can go to a sheltered workshop. President Obama kind of like limited the sheltered workshops because it was being utilized too much, and so it was almost like slave labor, so he limited that, but they still exist. So your child has options after high school. Children age out of special education at high school at 22 years of age. So you can keep them in there until you're 22. But what you really need to be planning on is transitioning your child. That means that when you have a child who's born or somehow gains a disability along the way, because you don't have to be born with a disability, you can gain it along the way, you need to be making a will. You also need to do with your will, you need to apply for a Social Security waiver so your income, if it's too high for state assistance, does not account for the child. And then a trust, a special needs trust, also needs to be established for that child. Because if you die, if your child gets a Social Security waiver and is eligible for services, if you die and they inherit like not even a lot, they will not be eligible for, because the state in probate, even if you don't have a will, is going to give it to the child, right? They will not be eligible for their services. So this is why you need to set up a trust. Whatever you leave, willed or not, will go into the trust and be allocated to the child so they do not lose their services. The hope in the reality for a lot of people who have children with disability is that they will outlive you. And so the minute you find out that they have a disability that can really impair their ability to live an independent life, you have to start preparing for that. And I know it sounds scary. I'm going to leave my email in the comments below to give you as much information. I'm working transition right now. But we had a presentation made by a parent who had a child, and he transitioned his child. His child has a severe cognitive disability, but she lives on her own. She lives in a house in DeSoto. She has her activities. She's living her life. When they told her, Lauren, come home, she was like, now, because she has her own life. And this is the life that you really want for your child, an independent life. So I have no more to say about special education. We're going to move on. Ms. Sonia, do you have anything to say about special education? And that goes the same for those who are in general education. Check your child's goals and if they're meeting it. Yes. If you see 70s, be
so
on.
glad you said that. Yes, I was just going to add that on. Just, parents check in general. See what's going on with your kids. Don't feel no kind of way about doing a pop-up. Just don't wear your bonnet and your nightgown to the school. We appreciate it. Your kids do too. Special education can definitely be a positive in helping your kids to get to where they need to be. We definitely don't want to always think about it as a negative because many of our kids are in special education for speech only. Many of our kids are in special education for issues that are simple, but they do need the additional assistance. So we definitely want to consider that as an option where necessary. We definitely don't want to add labels where no label need be, but certainly there are professionals who are going to love on your kids and try to help them be as successful as possible who are out there. So with that said, regarding special education, Ms. Johnson, I have to duck out of the conversation, but I want to thank you so much for having me on, and I certainly hope that you will have me back again. I want to encourage anybody that's listening to keep on listening. This is great information that's definitely going to help you if you're trying to move forward in your career, or if you're just trying to help your kids to be able to get ahead. Definitely keep listening. Ms. Johnson is definitely on the right track. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Appreciate you. Okay, so our next topic is discipline, and I hate that Mr. Straus had to leave us. L.D Straus left us because, you know, having a black man to tell us about discipline is important. But no worries, I have broken up some fights. I have had to step in there and have some understanding about what's going on, and I have had some background information on what has going on. And there are students who are harassed to the point that they are pushed to their limit, you know. And so what the school-to-prison pipeline actually does is that it has police in schools to criminalize children in an environment of learning, and that is just not appropriate. You should not get a record at school. You know, clearly behavior needs to be taught along the way, and it should be a part of curriculum. You see that character and morals count in elementary. It still matters in high school. You're still doing the same thing. It doesn't end. So, I mean, especially when children are not dealing with the real world, it is not right unless it's something that would be holding justice away from somebody else to punish children with assault for a school fight, you know. So you have to be able to advocate for your children. A lot of times they will try to remove them from instruction and put them in alternative school. They will have a hearing. At this hearing, this is where you need to advocate for your child. If your child is in special education, they will have a manifestation art to determine on whether their actions are a manifestation of their disability. So, like, if you have a student who is ADHD and they impulsively do something, then you could say that that's a manifestation of their disability. But if your child has a reading disability and they go off and hit somebody, that is not a manifestation of their disability, and therefore they will still be sent to the alternative school. However, if they were harassed and you can prove that, you need to bring all documentation to the hearing to prove that my child was harassed. They reported it to admin or teachers and nothing was done, and they were forced to defend themselves. So you always want to be prepared with documentation, and you know, if they're gonna treat your child like the real world, then you have to tell your child to react as if in the real world. Do not say anything. Call for your mother or your case if you have a case manager or even a close teacher on campus. Call for them. Make sure that you're not being, you know, pushed into something. Now, if you made a mistake, own up to it and face your consequence. Senator Murphy and Senator Cory Booker are working. They actually had a bill, but it never made it right now, and I don't know if it's ever going to make it because Cory Booker is running for president, but they had a bill out to deal to end school-to-prison pipeline discipline. And so what we recommend now is restorative practices. Restorative practices allows students to amend for what they did, to understand the consequence, and restore the relationship with the teacher. So it's not an ongoing beef. So look for that. It's a buzzword right now. okay? So you got to be careful. Some people will say that they do restorative practice, but for time's sake, I'm going to tell you to go ahead and perhaps I'll visit it at another time. Go ahead and Google what that is and then compare it to what is being practiced at your school. A lot of people say that to calm minorities down, like, oh, we're going to do restorative practices, we're going to be more understanding, but you have to understand how they view discipline and how they implement restorative practices. So lack of representation through curriculum, and then I'm going to be, this covers a whole, like, the next two things. And one more thing, and then I'm done. Okay. Lack of representation throughout curriculum. Most curriculum has been analyzed, and you find at most that 8% amount of curriculum that has anything to do with African-American students, okay, as far as their ancestors, their contributions to society, and who they helped to be. Now, when I was studying to become a principal, we had to observe a lesson about slavery. And the kids were calling the slaves, you know. And, you know, one of my comments was that you're not correcting the kids in saying the slaves, into saying the people who were enslaved, okay? These are people, they're not just the slaves, okay? And so what happens is that a lot of our curriculum, when it comes to Black people, centers around slavery and the civil rights movement. Well, 12 years of slaves is what the education system does reproduce, because for 12 years you're telling children that they were slaves. So without any education about what contributions and greatness they brought to American society outside of civil rights, which, you know, would benefit themselves. You know, we are on the math textbook. We have a real world NASA problem every unit, right? But nobody brought up Catherine Johnson, who worked for NASA and solved their problems. It's never even taught. We learned about Pythagoreans, but, you know, my daughter was watching Arthur the other day, and Arthur said, hey, Pythagoras may have not, you know, invented that. It may have came from Babylon. But that's not taught in school. So we have a big gap of education when it comes to the contributions and the contributions, the greatness, and the overall greatness of what other people besides our Eurocentric curriculum hones in on. And so therefore Stanford did a study, and in the study they enrolled students into an ethnic studies class, and they found that their attendance went up, their GPA went up, just, you know, their spirits went up. Everything went up about their educational experience. And what they realized is that learning about themselves empowered them. Well, we see that in the achievement gap. Whites are always at the top. Always at the top. I mean, like, always at the top. And I have analyzed district and national data. They're always at the top. And it's like, how is this the case when we know we don't achieve according to skin color? So something's happening with the design of education to make it so, right? So what is happening? Well, our white students, guess what they're doing? They're being educated about themselves, their ancestors, and their overall greatness and contributions to society. They're empowered in the education that they receive. Therefore, they do better. And that is what that Stanford study showed. So now academia knows that, but yet we're still not moving to a multicultural paradigm of education. We're still keeping it the same. Why? Okay? Same thing with discipline. When you look at discipline stats, you will see that African American students are more likely to be removed from instruction either within school, out of school, or DAP, alternative school placement. And then they do the worst on tests where they're removed from instruction more. You're removing them from instruction and then saying that they have a deficit. Well, you're shooting your own self in the foot. And those stats, I don't care what state you are in, it's located on your education agency website. Look at it. Parents have power. You are consumers. You will tell your education system how to serve you, or you can take your money elsewhere, which brings me to one of my last points, charter, homeschool, and co-op. Now, charter schools really came about because of integration. People didn't want their kids to go to school with Black children and Hispanic children, and so they started charter. Now, if I was to start a charter, and there's a company where you can actually pay for a charter, pay to do your charter, and it's generally accepted, and so that's why these charters get to pop up everywhere, okay? So you have a charter school, and so charter schools cannot say other people can't come. But if I put my charter school in the hood, in the hood of hoods, the Black neighborhood hood, then everybody who surrounds that charter school will have first dibs on the school. The school is funded by the enrollment of students. So now your enrollment, the amount that's paid for your child's enrollment to public school now goes to charter school. Now it goes to that charter school. And now the community and everybody, now you cannot say who can and who can't come. You have to have a lottery system, but it is general rule that the people surrounding the community have first dibs. Okay. And so that is what a charter school is. Homeschool, you register with the state. You say, I'm homeschooling my child. However, the funds are not directed to you. You have to pay for the education of the child. The average cost for that is $900, although a lot of parents don't even pay near that with the internet. You have so much to work from now. And then you have a co-op. And a co-op is really good because you're dealing with other parents. Some parents may be good at math. Some parents may be good at science. But what you're dealing with is like a reverse, well, what you can do anyway is a reverse classroom where the students have to research, during the day. And then as parents get off, you can start teaching classes because there's no time. What you do have to do, though, is meet the minimum required amount of minutes for each subject area that your state requires. Okay, so this is just an overview. I may be able to go through all those at a different amount of time. The thing is that Black people, until we're able to change the policy, which is the law, our children are going to suffer unless we also simultaneously educate at home. The problem with that is that we are paying equally into a school system. I'm receiving taxes on my houses, and I'm paying for school. Why am I paying for school that my child can't go to and learn about themselves and learn about their ancestors and learn about their greatness the same way what a white student could? But I'm paying my fair share, okay? Separate but equal is still in effect because of housing discrimination. So now I live in this school that's funded by property taxes, which means that it's underfunded from other people, and then the curriculum doesn't even address my child, but I'm paying my fair share. So this is money left on the table, and I want all the reparation activists to note that down. Please, it's money left on the table. If I had to take my child out, no, the school doesn't get that money, but I'm not getting my taxes back, right? My taxes will be used elsewhere, allegedly, okay? So the next option, the final thing I'm going to talk about is acceleration. Acceleration is important for our community due to the financial condition that we are in. When I went to college, I thought I had a college fund. I clearly didn't. It was a motivational tool that a lot of our parents used. And then we found out in the 90s that, hey, we could take out student loans, right? And, of course, a lot of us got into debt because of student loans. And so, of course, we do not want that for our children. One of the ways to get around that is acceleration, which is something that I did write a proposal for. School is rejected, but acceleration was a tool that I was very much promoting because of the socioeconomic status of the students that I would be serving. I knew that they did not have a lot of money, so children should be allowed to learn at the pace that they learn. Now, when I lived in New York, they had us in pace schools where you was in a 1, 2, or 3 class, and if you was in a 1 class, if you was in a 3 class, you felt dumb, but you probably wasn't a 3 in everything. You was just probably a 3 in certain areas, right? And so education does need to change where students are allowed to learn at the pace that they're learning and excel at the places that they're learning and be slow at the places that they're learning. Every child needs a champion. Rest in peace, Rita Pearson. So if they're able to do that, they can excel in areas. And so we have had students who graduate high schools as juniors in college. That saves 2 years worth of college. So if your child can do it even earlier than that, find ways to do it, because it is not your child's fault that they are ahead of the game, and the public school system will have to pay for their education, and they are paying for students in college right now through dual credit, through AP courses, and so those are the ways that they are able to obtain college credit while they are in high school. I wish I had a counselor that could tell you more about that, but please consider acceleration. Always consider acceleration options. Don't let people tell you that your child isn't eligible for acceleration, because there is no determinant. It's discriminatory for them to say that they can't accelerate because of color, achievement. We have a number of a number of students who receive special education services that are taking accelerated courses. So if you feel that your child can accelerate in a course, speak up for them and get that acceleration, okay? It's going to help your pocket, it's going to help your child, and it's going to help your family altogether achieve, what that child wants to achieve without becoming in debt, which is a big barrier into generational wealth. Okay? So with that, I'm done. Are there any callers? Anybody want to leave a comment? Anybody has a question? Anybody wants to point out something that I might have missed? I will definitely appreciate that.
All right, family, this is your time to call in. You know the number, 319-527-6239. I got a question I want to throw at you real quick, though. But once again,
okay,
family, you can call in 319-527-6239. It's press number 1, and we'll add you to the conversation. How do you feel about, like, a lot of our NBA, like LeBron James? He built a school. We have brothers like Jalen Rose. He has, like, a scholarship program for a lot of, I think, a school that he's a part of. And then, of course, we have Umar Johnson, Umar Johnson, who also wants to build a school. How do you feel about, blacks getting involved in building school systems? Go ahead. Or schools, not the school system, schools.
Mm-hmm. It is, in fact, very necessary, a thing at this point. Until we change policy, until we change curriculum, we definitely need to do that. We have people on both sides. I went to black schools all my life, and except for my master's, I went to a semi-Ivy in Dallas, although at this point it's not helping me open doors. You know what I'm saying? Like I thought it would. But I went to black schools all my life. I've been empowered. We went to different places and talked to different demographics of students and represented our community and our schools well. And I felt a sense of empowerment being out in the workforce. You can tell who went to HBCU and who didn't, well, I'm not going to say that only if you went to HBCU or if you didn't. I'm going to say that those who primarily went to black schools most of their life and then they went to a majority white school may be a little bit different in their approach, because they have more sense of themselves, whereas there are some black teachers that I have met that just like, let's not shake the boat, let's not say anything, we just got to deal with what it is. And I'm like, where does that mentality come from? It's never been taught to me, and I didn't understand where that came from. But when you hear about the stories that those people went through where they were terrorized and everything. Now, keep in mind, my first year at FAMU, I was in a dorm, and although I lived in New York until I was about 11, then I moved to Colorado, and I never really received outright racism like the kind you see in the movie. But when I went to FAMU my first year, it was like outright racism where they were calling our dorm rooms, and I remember the guy said, what does it feel like to be a nigger, right? And we had to be guarded like it was it's 1999. We had to be guarded like it was the 1950s, okay? The 1950s, the police were at every entrance because pipe bombs was being put in our university. And so CNN was like, oh, my gosh, they're bombing the black students trying to go to school, and people's parents were crying. You saw people rolling out of there with their suitcases and stuff because their parents was like, come home, it's not worth it. Still then, it was not equivalent to the racism that some black students then and after received on majority white institutions. And so then you understand that it is a survival skill to blend in and assimilate. And then there are some black people who just did it, and I actually met a black educator this year who had a negative view about black students, about black parents. She also worked as a social worker, okay? So her need for assimilation was so great that she thought negative, she should not be a teacher. If I had a choice, you should not be a teacher because, the thing about me is that I love my culture so much and I love my people so much that I don't mind that people love their culture. I want you to know about your culture and love it. And then we should be able to meet in the middle and respect one another. But our culture is not being taught. Our culture is not being disseminated amongst other people. We're just taught as slaves and civil rights overcomers, and then in a passive MLK versus a stoma MLK. And so that's why we need black institutions right now. And we need those people to be opening those schools. But we need those people to be educated somehow in how institutions work, how politics play a part. I'm sure a lot of people heard stuff that they have never heard before about investors and development and realty and how that plays a part, especially when you have things like Zillow that's going to, place with the school ranks and school ratings and stuff like that. You have to know about those things because sometimes a lot of these people get involved and they slap their name on something. And then the people running it is running it into the ground. So I would hope that they would be educated about that and make sure that it was good. Now, Dr. Umar Johnson is different. He's worked in education. He's done LSSP. And so he's trying to, he's got his building and everything, but the thing is that people don't understand that even doing a charter school, you have to fundraise to get your building. You're going to have to seek out some people and fundraise. He's trying to open up a private institution, which means that he will not be receiving any type of benefits from the state based on his enrollment. So people are like, he made $700,000. Well, if you look at a small elementary school's budget, it's in the millions. But because our community doesn't know that, then you pay him as swindler, as this, and as that. Well, he could start off small. but he was really trying to definitely do something different. So I respect him and what he's doing, and I just realized that most of our community does not know those things. It's necessary. We need more people doing it. I'm just trying to get my foot in the door with administration, and then a few years from now, I'll be opening my own school. But I'll be doing a charter because I believe that you can do an Afrocentric school with charter. You can. You can't limit anybody from coming to your school, though. But I believe more in a multicultural curriculum because it will empower our students to understand how the world works. And so one of the big flaws in Tulsa was that people cite, other than being insurance to high water, is that their lack of trade with international entities that would have helped him being, an asset to us. So, yeah. It's necessary. We need them. We need more of them until we can get policy change.
All right, family. Once again, the number is 319-527-6239. We have a special guest, Chika. She's right here on Debate Talk Free Radio. Inequities in Education, What Parents Need to Know is the title of this program. I see we have people listening to the show. If you have any questions in regards to this topic, you know the number, 319-527-6239. Now, I was watching this documentary. I forgot what channel it was, but it was talking about, the black colleges like Howard University, Spelman. But this particular documentary I was watching, it was about Morehouse College. And one of their concerns were, even though it's an all-black college, they started to let a lot of Caucasians attend these schools. They're saying it's a good way to raise money, things of that nature. A lot of people didn't approve of it, but some people did. What do you feel about a lot of the integration when it comes to other people coming to the all-black colleges?
It's good that the black colleges are being recognized as equitable institutions to receive education. Unfortunately, this is how a lot of our HBCUs no longer are HBCUs. When a white student or even a Hispanic student, I believe, comes to a HBCU, they are given minority scholarships. When I went to FAMU, we knew all the white people on campus. It was just that many white people. I think it was 4 or 5 of them. And everybody knew who they were. When I left FAMU, there were a lot of white students where you just didn't know who they were. But what FAMU does, which is unique, is educate people on the history, and they instill a pride. When people ask me, what was your college experience like? You went to HBCU. I was like, it is just like Hillman. I had the Hillman experience, And people who even went to HBCUs was like, mine was nothing like that. I was like, well, you didn't have FAMU League, okay? FAMU is a good school, people. FAMU is a good school. We have a strong alumni, even in Dallas. We don't stop, okay? So one thing that they did, and this is what I'm talking about. This is why we need the curriculum to change, and this is why we need institutions. If you're not going to change this policy, then we need to create our own institutions. Is that your freshman year, you go to the building of archives, and they tell you about the history of the school. Well, they tried to integrate FAMU 3 times with FSU. And the student said that if you integrate us, if you even go, because they already took their law, FAMU has a law school first, they took it and gave it to FSU. And they didn't get it back until, I think it was 2008, and they put it in Orlando. But the student said, if you try to integrate us, we're going to burn this place to the ground. And it was called the 3 Fires. They didn't believe them. So it was called the 3 Fires of FAMU, and every time they tried to integrate them, they would set it on fire. You are not going to integrate anything. And so people are armed with that history. And I think even, it's not just black students. We have a lot of international students. Our pharmacy program was, exceptional. So we had a lot of the Indian students were in the pharmacy program. We have a joint, what is that? engineering program with FSU. And so it's like, no, we're going to remain here. And that's what it's going to be, you know. And a lot of people are armed with that history, and that's why the alumni act so swiftly, raises money, does everything that they can to make sure that the school is in. It's kind of like Carter. I don't know if y'all seen that movie about Dallas Carter. It was Carter Boys.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
I worked at that. Yeah, I worked at that school, and Carter has an alumni that won't quit. And you'll see a lot of black teachers and a lot of black alumni, but what you don't see is even the white alumni from way back. You know, like Carter, you're not going to take it then, you know, because the alumni is so strong. And that's the key in keeping our institutions running. I donate to my school. My birthday fundraiser was for my school. Only one person gave, but it's okay. You know, I give to my school, you know, whenever I can. I think that they can do more to raise money because, you know, I graduated from SMU in 2016. I've been contacted every year, even though I don't have the job that I went for, to give money back to the school. Why isn't FAMU doing the same? But not saying that they don't need it, but I'm just saying that a lot of alumni does reach back. A lot of alumni is given to the school, but they need to have the effort come out even more. And so with that, you know, it's strong, but we have to be careful about integration. I think integration is fine as long as you're arming people with the history, and you're also watching over policy, which is something that we don't do a lot in education. We are not looking at the laws that are coming and with policies coming down the pipeline that will eventually affect schools. You know, with our HBCUs and stuff like that, you need to be actively recruiting. You need to make sure that your alumni in every state, all over the country, is involved in getting students to go there and to their testimony on the outcome of that experience. And so we just need to work a little bit harder at that because I see it already done harder. And SMU is not hurting for anything, but they're going to call me fall and spring and ask for some money, you know. But SMU hasn't called me since I graduated.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm just saying.
Yes, we have a caller standing by. Once again, family, the number is 319-527-6239. You know, definitely an interesting topic when it comes to education, what parents need to know. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to 706-505. You're live.
Yo, what's up? This your Hookanon. What's up, Sal?
Hey, what's going on? You feeling, bro?
Hey, shalom.
Hey, what's up, Sister Sheek? I just was listening in and calling to support, show some support. I want to know how you feel about what I'm about to say. I feel like it's good that we got black colleges and things like that. And I feel like maybe the black colleges should try to kind of get into the NCAA because a lot of these schools are really taking advantage of our black athletes. Like, they're making these schools rich. They even made it to where basketball players have to go 1 year into the NCAA. And I believe they did that is because they was losing a lot of money from Kobe and, like, LeBron going into the league. So I feel like maybe they should try to enter the NCAA and get, you know, these black athletes to come to their schools and build basketball teams and football teams. That way money can be generated to the college because a lot of these schools are making money off the football and off the basketball programs that they got, and you'll see the majority of these athletes are African American. So they're using our students. Yeah, they might be giving them an education, but they're making so much money off of them. And I want to know how you feel about what I just said.
I think our schools should move up. Actually, my school was trying to go from MEAC to, I believe, the NCAA or something right beneath it. which would help our athletes. And so that was the thing in that. We actually even had a slogan called "Moving On Up," right? Like, we're the deficits, and everybody was behind it. The alumni was behind it. They raised millions of dollars. And then the new president came in and said, no, we ain't doing that. You know, we need to focus on education. And really with no explanation or anything, just pull the plug on everything. We don't know where the money went. And stuff like that. And so that is something that you have to believe. Just the Central Park jogging case about it was coerced in some way. But yeah, I do agree with that. But the main way that we get that to happen is by increasing enrollment as well. You know, you start increasing enrollment, then you have some dollars, then you have some money to do it. I mean, like FAMU raised that money from different places, but if you have the enrollment to do it, then you can do it with ease, and you're not stressing the pocket academically or anywhere else. And so, therefore, we need more Black people to believe in HBCUs and what they can produce. You know, I'm a HBCU graduate, and this is what they produce. You know, a master's degree professional in the business of education. I know people in the private sector. I know people who are millionaires right now who came from HBCUs. But unfortunately, we have a lot of Black students and a lot of Black parents who look their nose down at historically Black institutions as if Black people do not know how to educate people. But if they truly knew their history, they would know that we have educated the world. So, and you get that from an HBCU. The first time I found out that I may be a Hebrew was in a humanities class on Florida A&M University's campus. They have something called the Gordon Rule, and I had to take a humanities course, and I took early civilizations, and a white educator, a white doctor, archaeologist, taught us about Kemet. And that was the first time, like, I knew Egypt was Black already. You know, when Michael Jackson came out, remember the time that conversation came up, and it was like, indeed, there were the Egypt nation and people were of Black skin. I knew that, but she confirmed it. You know, she dug in the land and said, hey, you know, these people were Black. Kemet means land of the Black. And so then she just threw out the question in one class. She was like, if Egyptians were Black and Jesus went and hid in Egypt, what do you think he was? And we were all like, and everybody looked at each other, you know. And it was like, oh, okay. You know, but it was just kind of left there and not really discussed. But that was the first time I heard it, and it was from a white educator. Conversely, in Colorado, I heard from a white educator, oh, slavery was okay because, you know, Africans were selling slaves themselves, you know. So somebody with white guilt trying to make it all right, you know. But, yeah, the HBCU is full of educators, Black, white, Hispanic, Indians, who actually believe in the education of students of color. And instead of coming to class, when that whole disenfranchisement thing happened with GW, and I'm sorry, if you wasn't in Florida, specifically Tallahassee, you don't know that GW stole and Jeb stole that election outright. I mean, they was finding, moving trucks with ballots in the middle of nowhere, and they was coming up GW. You know, I mean, it was so outright and blatant. And when I moved to Texas and I was telling people what happened, people didn't even know. So the stuff that we were seeing, people weren't seeing all over the world. And I was a part of the march that Andrew Gilliam, and he should have won that gubernatorial race, led for the disenfranchisement of the people in Florida. It was crazy. It's like everywhere, every time I move somewhere, like I lived in New York, Colorado, Florida, and Texas, every time I moved somewhere, something big happened in that particular place, and that was it. And we stayed in that Capitol all night. And nobody ever came out and talked to us, you know. Then they took away affirmative action in Florida. I mean, a lot was going on in Florida at the time. And it was actually on a talk radio show where they actually connected everybody involved to his father's cabinet or GW's cabinet in Texas. So, yep. Yeah, so increase the enrollment, and then we'll be able to go up to those things. Unfortunately, what will start to happen as we increase enrollment and we start to move up to NCAA and all that is that places that have been established, like the MEAC and the SWAC and all that, will be abandoned, and there'll be less competition. And then for a while, until other people can get their enrollment up, it will be destitute of athletics, which is a very big funding source for HBCUs as well as any university, really. So, plans would have to be made to bridge that time and bridge people into it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your response. Hey, what up, Sal? You already know there's always love here. Y'all have a good night. I'll be listening in.
All right. Thank
we
you.
Appreciate you. Appreciate the call. All right, family, once again, the number is 319-527-6239. Simply press number 1 if you want to be added into the conversation. I don't know. For me, I just feel like there's a negative stigma when it comes to HBCU, black colleges and stuff like that. I feel like there's people out there that's they almost feel like it's like less credibility, or I don't know. It's like a negative stigma when it comes to the black colleges. Did you feel that same way, or did somebody had to inspire you to want to go to a black college? Like, what made you want to go to a black college? Was it yourself, or was you directed to go to those black colleges?
I was, I was brought up. I'm an '80s baby, and I saw school days and I saw a different world, and that's just where I was going. That was for me, and that's where I was going. Even when I moved out to Colorado, I was a part of a program called Denver Educational Excellence Program. And what they did is they prepared minority children from 5th grade. This is how early it needs to start. Okay, so when Republicans get into office, they wipe out these programs. But I just happened to move in when Bill Clinton was in office, and people had their feelings about Bill Clinton. There was a lot of things in place that Bill Clinton had. His downfall was the 3 strikes thing, but there was a lot of stuff in place, and one of those federally funded programs was Denver Educational Excellence Program, and that program was targeted at minorities from 5th grade. So it was like from 5th grade all the way to high school. They intervened and they showed us how to get to college. They educated our parents on how to get us to college and how to finance it. And then they took us on college tours, and they made sure that we kept our grades up and everything throughout the whole thing. And it was actually my brother-in-law who when I was on my high horse or soapbox, like, why can't people just make the right decision? Why can't people just get A's in school and go? He was like, but when you were in New York, now when I was in New York, I was making A's and E's and stuff like that, but when you're not getting the benefits of doing those things, where you don't have a better life, or your mother can't afford bread because we live in New York and it's too expensive, that's a problem. Then you start to feel like it's not going to benefit me, unless somebody's selling you some dream of you'll get a scholarship if you get all A's, which is true, but is it going to cover the whole 4 years? So that reality teaching that program did for us was an intervention. Without intervention, a lot of kids do end up doing the status quo, because psychology actually teaches us that people are a product of their environment, So I didn't have any stigmas about HBCUs. That's where I was going. I was in Colorado. I was like, I'm not going to college. Me and my sister had full rides to CSU. And so that's another problem HBCUs have, is that, I had a full ride to CSU, had a full ride to DU. I did wind up going to Florida A&M because when we went and visited, I was like, this is my school. I want to go. And my mother felt so strongly about how we felt with it. And a lot of our family members was like, oh, y'all should go here. But what happened is that we did have a lot of, schoolmates who went, but if you didn't keep a certain GPA, guess what happened? You lost a scholarship after the first year. And a lot of them lost their scholarships because they wasn't prepared. And even when I went to college, I went to HBCU, and my HBCU was more rigorous than my master's, okay, at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. So when I got there, I didn't even know if college was for me. And keep in mind, I had a 4-point-something GPA. I was who's who amongst high school students. I got a 21 on the ACT, never done a practice test or even seen it, And so it was just like, when I got to college, I was like, well, I'm trying my hardest. Like, I was putting in that effort, but I wasn't getting the results. And then I realized, it's some tricks to that trade too. Then I realized what I needed to do, and then I started getting better results. But the first year, I was like, should I even be here? And I only had a 2.9 in a HBCU. So surely if I had went to any of those quote-unquote full rides, that's why they give them, because they know that you're not as equipped, as others because of the funding of your schools or whatever. You're the top 10%, like Texas, they give the top 10%, everybody automatic entrance, and a lot of scholarships. But, they know that they can give it to somebody at Dallas Carter and then somebody at a Richardson school, and they know that the Carter person is only going to keep that scholarship for a certain amount of time. And, they'll keep on funding whoever. But the enrollment is still coming in, right? So, it's just tricks of the trade that I feel like HBCUs don't have. But they're not trying to do that. You know what I'm saying? They want people to come and they want them to complete, and that's a bad rap for HBCUs. It's the completion rate, because a lot of people come down there and they get some partying. But I mean, you're gonna see a whole bunch of black people in one place, and if you're not used to that, you're gonna see girls for days, guys for days, fat parties. I mean, everything. So you have to be focused and say, hey, I'm going to do all my work now so I can party later. And that was our rule of thumb. Like, hey, we got to write this essay real quick so we can show to the party, And our first year, that certainly did work, although there was some struggle because now, like, high school was a little effort for me, Like, I could do anything and I'm still going to get an A because it was better than most, But college was very different. And it was very rigorous, the education I received. And the notoriety or the reputation for my school specifically was that the students came out so polished and ready to be interviewed and things like that. Now, I have met others from other HBCUs, which is like, you as a college, like, they didn't tell you how to turn it on and turn it off and stuff like that. Some colleges are dedicated to giving a black educational experience without the notion of, well, we're preparing you to work amongst others, So you'll get somebody who's talking slang and, just like, well, did you go to college? I mean, to the point that you're like, did they go to college, Because at my college, they will teach you, in your cultural language. The habitual be is not a bad thing. I be this, I be that. There's no languages that have is our verb but English, right? So IB is actually a sign of intelligence, right? But this is how you present when you're in front of this group of people because this is what they respect. You know what I'm saying? Not what you present, it's how you present. And what you present should be something that is beneficial to your community, to yourself, to your family, and everything else. So that's why they call it excellence with caring. We're going to teach you how to be excellent in our realm, in their realm, and then caring, you're going to care about each thing no matter where you go. So that's the education I received. Not everybody gets that from an HBCU, but from, like, when you talk about FAMU, when you talk about Tuskegee, when you talk about Spelman, even Clark Atlanta, stuff like that. I'm not as familiar with the ones in Texas, although I've met several professionals from Prairie View and Texas Southern who are very impressive in the boardroom, in the classroom, wherever. So we shouldn't have fear about our own people, or we shouldn't think that blackness equates to low quality.
All right. So once again, family, we appreciate y'all for tuning into the program. And, of course, all the information in the description box. You want to reach out to Sheek, just reach out to her. I got her Facebook link in the description box. I'm going to get the rest of the information as well. But any last words you want to share to the audience, you can go ahead.
I just want to share to the audience that parents, you have the power. The curriculum is in your hands, and if we cannot get lawmakers and policymakers and these institutions that help make policy to listen to us in as far as they're starting to. Academia is starting to higher education is starting to understand this, but it's not trickled down yet. But we can demand this as consumers, as parents of our education system, that we fully pay into and we're getting very little out of. And if they're not willing to be able to do that, then they should not be paid on our students' enrollment and attendance. So we have to bond together and find ways that we can do co-op, which I really favor the co-op over just individual homeschool, but co-ops and how we can form charter schools. The reason why I specifically am trying to get experience first is because I want to get the experience. You don't have to have experience. I mean, I can start a charter tomorrow, if I have all my stuff in order. But the reason why I'm trying to get experience is so that parents can feel comfortable with having their children in my hands, because I also plan to be the administrator, to be the principal over the school. But there are several people who start up charters who have no educational experience, but a charter always needs a certified admin to the charter school, because those are the credentials that you're going to need to even have it in order. So let's start building those things, and let's start being vocal about why we're doing it. Policymakers and institutions will not include our greatness and contributions in society equitably. And that's all we're asking for, is equitable education. Equitable education. That's all we want, and it's what we're paying for, and we're paying the same fair share as everybody else. And so, unfortunately, I will say that a lot of our white counterparts are leaving the school system for various reasons, but we're still getting handed the same education. It's not like they left and now we have a more multicultural, culturally relevant, or linguistically relevant type of atmosphere. It's like they left and we're still learning the same thing. You don't complain about the LGBTQ community if you have not written your education commissioner, if you have not written policymakers in your state. And there is an education agency in every state where you can get the data on your school, where you can get the discipline data, and where you can get information on who to contact about whatever it is you need. You as a consumer, you have the power. And a lot of times they pigeonhole teachers in because people are afraid of losing their job. If you speak out against the thing, like even tonight, I had to be careful about what I said. Is it public information or is it my opinion? I already had to been thinking about that weeks before I even did that. We did this show. So please be vocal about your kids' education and don't reward them with enrollment if there's not going to be any change. Then we got to start doing our own charter, homeschool, and co-op. Consider it.
Yes, yeah. One more quick question. It's kind of off topic, but it's kind of on the topic.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I never went to HBCU. I've heard about them, but I'm in New York City myself. It's not really pushed to go to those kind of colleges. So unfortunately, I went to Hunter College. I went to Kingsborough Community College at first for 2 years, then went to Hunter College for physical therapy. But watching these movies like Drumline, School Days, these are like, are they accurate depictions of like what goes on in the black school? I don't know if you ever watched those movies before, like Stomp the Yard, School Days. Like, which one of those movies is like an accurate depiction of what it is, what it's like to be in a HBCU?
I would say the most accurate depiction that I have seen and actually experienced would be A Different World. That was like my experience, totally, from the interaction between the teacher, and maybe because it was a long-running series. But, okay, so as far as something contemporary, yeah, bands are real. Okay, so at a HBCU, you have the Divine Nine, the Greek people, right? And they step and they have their parties and they do their community service, right? But at a black institution, you're going to have the dorm set team, the organization set team. Like, every dorm has a set team. Every dorm has a queen. Every dorm has, all this stuff go on. So you're not excluded from those things because you are not from or you're not included into a Divine Nine or something like that. You are experiencing those things, pageants, coronations, everything, right? And so with the band is real deal. The band is real deal. Yeah, that's what you're going to be going through in the band, and sometimes worse. I mean, Florida A&M actually, there were charges brought up on people for hazing in the band. And so they were like, oh, we didn't know who hazed, but it was just kind of like, maybe just among the student body, you kind of like know it happens. And not only that, at an HBCU campus, you can be coming from the library. I was coming from the library at 12. And they really need to stop with the hazing, like with the physical hazing, because they have no knowledge of somebody's physical health. So the hazing does need to stop. I remember one time Delta Sigma Theta actually got caught in hazing one year, and then the next year they had a straight, what they call a paper line, meaning that anybody who met the qualification, could make it, and they had a 50 girl line. It was that big because they could not. I mean, and they cracked down on this hazing situation. But hazing does need to stop. It's really bad. You don't break somebody down to pick them up. I mean, we're people of color. You don't have to break them down. But in the band is probably worse than Divine Nine when it comes to that type of stuff, because it's so serious. Like, the band is serious. The band is the heartbeat of the school. The sports is just the reason why we have halftime at HBCUs, especially somewhere like FAMU where you have the Marching 100. And, so those were accurate depictions, and sometimes when it goes too far as well, it depicted it accurately. Some people from Divine Nine will say, oh, no, that's not true. That's not true for everybody, but I don't know any organization maybe Sigma Gamma World, but any other organization of the Divine Nine that hasn't had a hazing incident, whether locally or or nationally. But that's something you have to prepare your child for. If somebody's asking you to do demeaning things, then you don't need to be there. Be an individual. Be what they call us? Oh, me, find me. Be me, find me. If it comes down to your health, and which is your wealth and your well-being. So, But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It changed my life. And I would never trade it, even though I came out with loans and stuff, I would never trade it for the world. It just made me proud to be who I was. And I was already proud because I went to all that schools, but when you go higher education and you're really getting into the knowledge, like some of the knowledge that we kind of see as Hebrew Israelites, it becomes a whole different thing.
Yeah, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she definitely want to go to school outside of New York City. So, and I'm gonna actually encourage her about going to a black college and stuff like that, and I can actually let her listen to this show, and hopefully she'll be even more inspired to go to a black college. But I appreciate you for coming on the program. Is there any information you want to put out there for people that want to reach out to you?
My email is shikajohnson@gmail.com. If you need any information about special education specifically, because that's my area of expertise right now, or any questions in general, that's fine. If you want to connect with, we have an HBCU network here in Texas. It doesn't matter what state you're in, we can get you with somebody in your state. So if you want to connect on that level, that's fine as well. I'm also on Facebook in the Hebrew community doing the Hebrew Israelite Information Exchange, a.k.a. Myrtle Nation, on YouTube and on Facebook. And there's a long explanation behind that, but I'll save that. But go ahead and look me up there. And so my education, I started a like page for education, and I started it because I wanted to disseminate the information. We have activism for so many things, but the main thing that hinders our community and our state of mind is education. It's the main thing that should be intact. So I'm declaring myself on this show an activist for change in education and empowering parents. So my life page where I disseminate a lot of information for parents is Sheek Johnson, MED. Yeah, I worked hard for those letters. Sheek Johnson, MED, which stands for Masters in Education. And on that like page is where I disseminate a whole bunch of information just to keep it up and coming. And so I officially will launch June 15th, but there's still information up there right now. Go ahead and like it and keep abreast to it so that way your child can get the most out of the system possible. So.
All right, once again, we appreciate you for coming on the platform. All right, guys, make sure you keep up with the schedule. Of course, we got shows all the way up to Friday, so make sure you keep up Monday to Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Go to www.blogtalkradio.com/debate talk for you. Go to the description box, support the program, keep us on the air, and we're going to see you guys next time. Take care, and God bless.